Welcome to the very first episode of Playbook Broken. I'm Marc Sirkin, CEO of Third Door Media, and I could not be more excited to kick this off. This show exists because, quite simply, the old playbooks, they just don't work anymore. Marketing is changing faster than most people can keep up, thanks to AI, shifting buyer behavior, and a business world that's being rewritten in real time. If you've ever looked at the tried and true tactics and thought, yeah, that's not hitting like it used to, you're in the right place. On Playbook Broken, we're talking to disruptors, operators, and unapologetically honest voices about what's next and how we actually get there. And for this first episode, I had to bring somebody in who's truly special. Today's guest is a dear friend and a total unicorn, Molly St. Louis, co-founder, Mosaic Group Media. She's one of the smartest marketers I know, a brilliant producer, a creative mind, and honestly, just one of the kindest, most talented people I've had the pleasure of working with. In this episode, we'll dig into why social selling works, why traditional PR is falling flat, and what the hell we're supposed to do about brand measurement in a post-unicorn world. We'll also explore Molly's use of AI in the real world and wrap up with a powerful segment I call Force Yourself, where she shares how she navigates hard decisions and high-stake moments. Let's jump in. Molly, welcome to the show.
Marc, it's so great to see you.
It's great to see you too. Thank you for being my first guest. Super
Absolutely.
exciting.
I love the name of this podcast, Playbook Broken, because that is absolutely true. It absolutely is.
Yeah, and it's going to cause people a lot of pain over the next few years as we figure this out.
Absolutely. I'm feeling the burn as we speak.
That's it. So your journey has been, like mine, wild and winding. Just to get started, just hit us with the highlights and talk about your latest venture and how you got here.
Yeah. So I started in entertainment. I was an actor growing up. I was raised by a Shakespearean actor. I'm married to a television actor now. So I'm very much in that. I always have a foot in that world as well. But one of the best parts about it was that I took traditional communication from theater, from film, from these sort of constructs, and then I parlayed it into what I do in the B2B world. I love the other side of my brain is I'm a geek, and I would love to just identify as that like creative artsy person, but I'm the person that wakes up contemplating how humanity will be impacted by whatever we're doing now. I love behavioral science. Halfway into my career over the last 10 years, it's been working in the media. So I've been a writer for Inc. magazine. I've been a writer for Adweek and a few others like Huffington Post, always covering digital transformation, especially as it pertains to marketing. So 8 years ago, writing for Adweek, I was given the assignment to tell how AI might transform our jobs in the future, or how to tell what's AI and what's just being marketed as AI. So it's been really cool to see this whole AI journey. So now I am the co-founder of Mosaic Group Media. My husband and I have this media company where we do thought leadership and build media platforms for companies that need to develop a perspective on thought leadership in a very crowded marketplace.
The segue here is when you and I met a few years ago now, actually it's more than a few years ago, ChatGPT wasn't a thing.
Nope.
This show isn't about AI only, but from your perspective, talk to us about how the world changed since we first got our hands on that technology, because I think it's applicable to what you're trying to do with Mosaic.
Absolutely. It's funny, Marc, because you've always been a catalyst for me to change myself, because I'm like, what's he doing over there? I maybe didn't want to adopt AI before because I kind of came from that traditional creative realm where you're supposed to have ideas yourself. You're supposed to be able to come up with angles immediately. Our brains are trained to do that just the same way that coders go to school or anything. We're trained to see the Venn diagram of how a brand fits with what's trending in the news, for example. And so watching the rise of AI has been extremely interesting, because on the first blush, when people said this is going to take over, like generative AI specifically, I was like, I don't like this. I mean, it might, but it might really lead to really terrible writing, because the first thing that somebody showed me that a generative AI wrote had a lot of emojis and it looked really weird. And this was a couple of years ago. And I said, absolutely not. I don't want anything to do with this. And then through friends like you, through a couple of other friends that are early adopters of things, I went, ugh, I'm going to have to get on this bandwagon, right? I'm going to have to do things a little bit differently. So I really personally went into it full force. But the worries that I have is that my background's thought leadership, having a perspective that's different than everybody else's, leading with your thought, not regurgitating what everybody else is saying. And the very nature of generative AI is that it can only learn from what else is out there. So my thing is, if you don't have an interesting perspective, ChatGPT isn't going to give you one. You still need to do that. That's number one. Number two, if you're using it to develop content for your brands, is it going to start sounding like everybody else? Are you going to diminish your brand and your differentiation in the market? But I don't know, like, I'm not as close to it as you are in a lot of ways. So what do you think about?
Yeah, I think you hit on some of the key pieces, right? I think that differentiation and human creativity, at least today, still are a differentiator. Like the machines aren't quite there yet. Maybe they will get there, maybe they won't. But I think that we're in that stage where really skilled operators of the technology can really push themselves using their experience to get to that next level. I know that's some of the use cases I do is I know a lot about marketing. I know a lot about psychology. I know a lot about people. And so I can use it to help me articulate and think about those kinds of things. But I think you're right. I think at this point, it's not going to have an original thought per se, but I think that professionals like yourself can use it to really accelerate and maybe explore new ideas that you hadn't thought of or find counterpoints and just push yourself almost like an eager assistant, if you will. I think that there's an enormous amount of power there. And then there's just the baseline of the things it can do, like data analysis or copy proofing, grammar, that kind of stuff to give you ideas. But I think we're all trying to learn how to use the technology and it's coming so fast in these waves. So it's very hard to keep up with what's the latest thing that it can do or what should I do with it. I think your perspective is right, though. I think that, especially from where you're coming, which is thought leadership is uniquely human. There's all these different factors to put into the pot. And so I think we're safe for a little while, but maybe not. I don't know.
Maybe not. And I think your point is good too, because it does tell you what else is out there. If you use it for a first draft, you think, okay, if this is the first draft, now I know what other people are saying. Now, how do I add to that with my perspective? And how do I see something different? Because that's ultimately what is going to get you press for your thoughts or get people to watch your content. And there's this huge push for subscriber led growth right now. And so people really are looking for content that is original and they still like content. I think AI can totally accelerate that.
I agree. All right. Enough chit chat to get started. Let's give everybody what they want. It's why they're here. We're going to get into Playbook Broken. So in the setup of the show, there's a number of segments that guests can pick from, everything from breakdowns to playbook moments, workshops. I'm still workshopping the whole thing myself. So today, Molly, you're going to help me with the two that you picked. So we're going to start with the breakdown. So playbooks are breaking down and being ripped up all over the place. Molly, give me something in your bag of tricks that's tried and true, but maybe isn't working as well as maybe it used to.
Yes. So there were two things that I was thinking of. The first one that is working is social selling. You see online communities popping up all of the time. And I'm in the midst of doing a study with two really cool companies, Magnolia and EM Marketing, who are trying to get to the bottom of this new customer behavior, which seems kind of counterintuitive in a lot of ways. We thought that customers were supposed to not to want to talk to a human. They're performing most of the digital journey online before they even engage with sellers. This is after the pandemic. And now what we're finding is that they want to interact with human beings, not just customer testimonials, not just like, give me a customer testimonial. Like, no, no, no. I want to talk to one of your customers because this testimonial isn't answering all of my questions. And even better, I don't want you to be in the room as the marketer or the salesperson. Right? So that's why there's this really cool push for online communities because people can ask the questions of others in their industry that they respect and that don't have a bias for a certain product. So that's social selling. But what my question to you, Mark, If you're the marketer in this situation and I'm telling you online communities are where it's at, but you can't be there, you can't control it. Don't bring your marketing speak, don't kill the vibe. How do you capitalize on it as a marketer?
Wow. Gosh, I love that answer. And there's a lot of LinkedIn, I want to say LinkedIn porn. I probably shouldn't say porn, but there's a lot of LinkedIn stuff
It's all
talking
right.
about
I get
how
what you mean.
exactly. There's a
Porn
lot
is
of that going on.
LinkedIn porn is the thing.
Okay, LinkedIn porn is
Yeah.
like. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of this chatter like GTM is broken. The old things don't work. This is part of why Playbook Broken exists, is because I really want to explore what's happening. What you just said blew my mind a little bit because it makes so much sense. It's so intuitive. And it doesn't really make the data wrong. Like, people don't really want to talk to salespeople. We've seen this data for 10 years now. There was a study, I think 10 years ago. Like, people don't really want to talk to salespeople until they're ready to buy. There's also another piece of data that I found fascinating the day I saw it. It was like 81% of people know the solution they're going to buy before they even start researching it. Something like that. Don't quote me on the number, but it was like, oh, that's interesting. But what you're saying is an extension of the word of mouth, like in a way, which is like, I want to get unfettered. I want to have a conversation with somebody who's going to tell me the truth, is really what I'm reflecting back to you. And of course that makes sense. And of course the marketer doesn't get to be in the room, because then it's colored and it's, I know you, and hey, you bought this piece of software. How did it really work? Tell me the truth, good or bad. It's okay to have bad things. It's okay.
It's
And I think
it's more
part of the
honest if
challenge is,
you are.
yeah, exactly. And so look, not every piece of software, no software is perfect. And so can we admit that humans make imperfect things, sellers make mistakes, buyers make mistakes, use cases change. Like what you said is like wildly interesting. The word community is a little loaded. Maybe for another time we can get into community talk, but let me ask this though. When you talk about community, are you talking about like a Slack group or a message board? Are you talking about an event? Like give me context for when you say the word community. What do you mean?
Yeah, all of the above. And when the report comes out, you guys are going to see which communities are performing better than other ones, but you'll have to wait until late May for that one. But
Love it.
but by community, I mean you either join an industry specific community, like if you, for example, are in revenue operations, they have a lot of them for that, or marketing, perhaps joining a LinkedIn group, like that, building your own community around your product, or simply going, I'm gonna commit to going to networking events and seeing people in person, so that it is this again, like community around people that like the same things, which I'm going to geek out here for a second because my area of study is media. And so it, for those of us that are old enough and of a certain age,
Do it.
remember the online chat rooms of the
Of
90s?
course.
Oh yeah. So that's the history of social influencers came out of those chat rooms. Originally it was things for hiking, like chat rooms about what do you guys like to hike? What's the best gear for hiking? And these influencers just were talking about the things that they actually liked. And then companies noticed the spike in sales. Makeup influencers ended up doing the same thing and then monetized influencers. And they kind of lost their cred a little bit because now we know that some people are paid. The FTC had to step in and say, you have to disclose these things. But I think these communities, these just areas where people can talk, are becoming much more like those early chat rooms before the monetization stepped in and screwed everything up in terms of making it biased and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And we see evidence of this all over the place. I don't know, I got 15 Slack channels and Discord channels. They can be a little hard to keep track of, but I think you're right. And so just to dig in a little bit further, when you say social selling, you're not talking about like a sales rep using LinkedIn with the AR, SDR, and you're talking about actual community in context of social selling, which is, I don't think I've ever heard that parallel made.
Yeah. Because back in the day, before we had the internet, who did your hair? I like it. Oh, it was this guy. All right. I'm going to go to that because my friend went there.
Yeah.
That's the very core of
Yeah.
social thing.
Isn't it funny concept of know, like, and trust? Like, I want to do business with people that I know and I like and I trust is so fundamental, so human
Yeah.
to everything. You realize that when you go to an event and you meet somebody and they just open up and you're like, you would have never done this digitally, or I had to be here to have this conversation, or I had to invite you on the podcast to have this conversation, or whatever it might be. It's so interesting, the connections. And I think my assumption is that we all crave that at some level. And I don't want to be lied to. I don't want to have marketing speak voice. I mean, just tell me what's going on and let me figure it out.
Yeah, my husband has this word because he's an actor, and when he sees somebody in public that maybe is being disingenuous, and he'll say to me, "We're actors and we can recognize when somebody's acting." And meaning like, I got you. What's really going on here? And I think marketers have that same spidey sense where you go, "Oh, okay, this is positioned as you giving your opinion, but how are you connected in this situation?" You know?
Yeah. So is that harder? So since you market to marketers and I market to marketers and martech.org markets to marketers, is it harder to market to marketers? Can I say that more times? But is it harder to do that because everyone has antennas? Or do you think it actually makes it counterintuitively easier because it's so easy to tell when somebody is like putting on the sell?
I think you can tell when somebody's putting on the sell because of the language that they use. So when they say things like, in this ever evolving digital landscape, or if this unprecedented times of uncertainty, or whatever they're talking about, I think just talking to people like a human being. I had an interesting educational experience because I became a marketer and a columnist before I went to school, college for it, before I went back to school. And I wondered, why am I getting these opportunities that people have been doing their whole life? Much better marketers than me, or whatever, much more educated people than me. And when I went to college, I realized that college teaches us to write all the same, teaches you AP style, and teaches you that good writing is clear and concise, and you don't use double entendre, or you don't speak the way that, or you don't write the way that you talk. And personally, I always just wrote the way that I talk because I was used to characters or playwriting and things where people can say, they can say things that don't make sense sometimes because they're workshopping them in their mind. And I've found that was the key to landing some of these things, was just being exactly who you are. For me, I didn't know any other way. But I think we also might need to revisit how we educate people, because we're teaching them sameness. And those are the people that ChatGPT are going to replace,
Yeah.
because because it can learn from those formulas. And we
Yeah.
need to be bigger than the formula.
There's something super profound, Molly, about what you just said, because that is what ChatGPT is, right? It's trained on everything. So it's basically average, and things like emojis or colons or M dashes that are overused. It's like, where's it getting that from? There's something really profound what you just said. I need to think more about it. But what I take from that, from all that is not to be trite, as I don't think it's trite at all. I think it's quite the opposite. Be human. That's
Yeah.
social selling, right? Talk to people, don't talk at them, and maybe good things will happen. That seems like
Yeah.
a good idea. It seems like a good part of the playbook that maybe, have we forgotten that part of the playbook? Has it become so selling, so insistent on MQLs, SQLs, driving the funnel? Have we forgotten that? Or have good marketers always, they do that anyway? It's never gone away.
Well, here's the thing that I know that you do better than anyone else. You make friends, not contacts. So many people will say, "How can you pick up the phone and just get that person to do you a favor? You show me how to network." And I think sometimes back in the day when people would think about networking, they think, "Oh, let me see how many business cards I can get out in this
Yeah.
room," instead of staying with maybe one or two people and just having a really great, deep conversation, and actually being, you are memorable, but your objective is to learn about that person, not to tell everybody how great you are. It's to learn about other people and build those relationships. And you've always done that so beautifully. And I think it's just inherently who you are. But also, it's the side effect is that it's good for business too.
Surprise. Know,
Surprise.
like, and trust.
Yeah.
All right. That was like unbelievable. I think this is working. I don't know if there's comments. People hate this. That's fine. But we're going to transition into the next segment.
Okay.
So this is called Strategy Workshop. And I'm partially, I don't know, Molly, if you know who Mike Birbiglia is, or if you've ever listened to his podcast, it's called Working It Out.
I feel like I have seen his comedy.
Yeah, his comedy's amazing. He has a podcast that's super popular. He has comedians on, and at the end, towards the end of the show, they work on something that they've been thinking about, like a kernel of a joke or idea for a sketch or maybe a whole special. So this strategy workshop is kind of that in a way. And so I'm gonna try to see if we can make this happen here. So we talked beforehand briefly. We talk a lot, but we talked briefly beforehand. And this might be a little bit of a can of worms because I know it's a can of worms for me. But brand measurement in a world of performance marketing, like to me, like what do you see happening here? And what can we do about it? Like the culture, the marketing culture is so performance driven that I feel like we've forgotten things like the 4 Ps. We've forgotten brand measurement. And I'm being super generic about it. And I might be, to be fair, narrowing this to like B2B marketing since that's where I spend most of my time. But what do you think? What's going on here? And how do we do something? What do we do about it?
Yeah. Okay. So not, I don't want to give you guys history lessons because I'm a geek about that kind of stuff. Shout out to my chief revenue officers friends who almost always are as well. But I, this came out of a conversation with my other good friend, Brent McNamara, who's the head of Solutioneers. And he is a revenue person. And one of the things that we were both noticing together is that over the last few years, companies have been hiring revenue teams, meaning like marketing, sales, and customer success. And then when they haven't performed within a quarter, they all get fired and the cycle continues. And this is a lot of it is because there was the unicorn bubble burst. You remember unicorns were all of the rage, like maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. Don't quote me on the number, but it was like everyone wants to be a unicorn. And they also want to give this idea of we are a unicorn and we want to scare other competitors to think that we are doing better than they are. So we take out these billboards and these glossy ads and all of these things that we cannot measure. We don't know if the right audience is seeing these things. We're just doing it as like perception tactics. But now, after the pandemic, with the whole AI efficiency thing, investors have gotten tired of these valuations that are bloated, basically. The revenue numbers just aren't really there. And so I think that that is driving this heavy focus on marketing being able to attribute all of their activities to leads generated, marketing qualified leads generated, and even some cases, sales qualified leads generated. So for people like me who work in brand and like very, very top of funnel, it gets really tricky because how do you know? I mean, you might have known that 2 million people saw that, but which one of them became customers? And there's starting to be better tools for this, but then it draws into question, you touched on it earlier, where people have already made their decision before they've even gone online to research, and that speaks to brand. They don't know where they saw you. They've seen you, you're kind of in their brain and everything, but how do we put a price on that? What do you think?
I struggle with this deeply. I like to think of myself as a brand marketer who found himself one day a performance marketer because the world changed. I remember, 20, 25 years ago, brand was really talked about in a different way than it's talked about today. I almost feel like brand, like we're almost trying to shoehorn brand into performance marketing, and it just isn't that, right? The word brand is tough too. It's a little bit like the word community, which again is a whole other conversation. But to keep it simple, right? A brand is effectively oversimplification, but a promise,
Yeah.
right? The brand has promises built into it. You know what you're getting when you buy a pair of Nike sneakers. You know what you're getting when you go to McDonald's, right? When you sit in a Rolls Royce, not that I ever have, but I assume you're looking at luxury. So there's a promise connected to it. And I think the example I've been using is video because we're thinking a lot about video. This is part of the reason Playbook Broken exists in the first place. Like, how do you do video? How do you measure it? How do you think about the value of it? And the culture is so wrapped around performance metrics. How many clicks did you get? How many views and for how long? And right, the platforms measure things. Oh, if the video was loaded, that's a view. That's not really a view. If you didn't get this far in the conversation, you don't get this information you don't get this part of the conversation. There's no value to it. Right?
Absolutely.
So I think the marketing culture is broken a little bit. I could go on a long rant about attribution, but I think it does come back to what you're saying, which is like how do you, just because you can't measure brand doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but that presents a real challenge for leadership teams because brand's expensive, right? Commercials are expensive and creatives are expensive and creative thinking is expensive and trying new things is expensive. And if you can't tie it back to a performance goal, it ends up being a thing that like, I think it was a Supreme Court Justice Bork maybe who said he was talking about porn and he said, I know it when I see it.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Like, it's that, right? It's that. It's would you like Molly, would you rather have a $50,000 a month Google ad spend that generates X amount of dollars or a million viewers on a YouTube channel? It's hard to know. Like like I'm not sure how to think about in the modern marketing measurement world. It's clear that something is happening, but I don't know how to measure it.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and it might be because I recently reread Franklin Covey's book, The 4DX Model, and
Yeah.
one of the things that they talk about in there is those wildly important goals, and not having too many wildly important goals because that will take away from everything else that you're doing. You got your day job and the whirlwind and everything. And so one of those things I think the takeaway from for me as brand or top of funnel marketer is to be very, very specific about what it is that you're spending money on. So if we're going to do a high production branded content series, I don't, it's scary to go, oh, we're going to pay $1 million for this. And then I don't know if it's going to work. And like my executives are going to say, well, what else are you doing? That's scary. But if you think it through and say, okay, this is my wildly important goal is to increase awareness, and this is the vehicle in which we're going to do that, then you have to chop it up into other ways. So how are you going to use that in an email campaign, which you can measure? You can measure how many opens you got. Did this influence a land and expand strategy, for example? Then maybe you use it on homepages, you chop up that content in different areas. So I think that we have to together come up with a grid that assigns a value to brand, because we do need
Yeah.
to be more intentional about it, because to be honest, Mark, some of the stuff that we invest money in is bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
it just is. And you just go, I don't know, like,
You did. Yeah.
it goes. And I'm not saying like we can't like make mistakes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we can't do too much of the things just
Yeah.
because they've always been done that way.
Yeah.
They've broken.
Fascinating. Yeah. The only thing that jumped out at me as you're talking that I think I'll just play back for you to think about is I want to say to you, like, don't narrow cast brand as top of funnel only. And I don't think you mean to, but like you said, oh, I'm a top of funnel marketer. And then you're talking about brand. Like, it's not just top of funnel, right? Because know, like, and trust, right? Like at the end of the day, if I know a brand, I trust a brand, I'm more likely to do business with that brand. And if I know them because I don't know, did product sponsorship on my favorite TV show, or they invested in a local community program. I don't know. Like again, it becomes an attribution mess. But I just hear you say brand top, I'm a top of funnel marketer. I don't know, Molly. I think you might be more than a top of funnel marketer. I suspect you are, but
Maybe, yes. I think because some of my earlier titles were director of branded content, which was top of funnel activities, but you're
right.
absolutely right. And so also, yeah, that's a good checkpoint for me. I'm like, yeah, I do need to think about it through the rest of the funnel, because that is what we are supposed to be doing. But I think you're absolutely right. I understand the executive need to attribute some of the things we can't, but I think maybe if we come up with checks and balances for how that's presented is probably the right way to go.
Yeah, you hinted at it and we'll move on. But I think it's not that it can't be measured, it's that it can't be measured the same way performance marketing is measured
Yeah.
directly. But that doesn't mean there's not another way. We need to be creative and think, okay, maybe it's through traditional surveys, brand awareness surveys, right? And like, how well is our brand? Maybe it's share of voice on things like social that aren't necessarily direct performance. But I think that the language has been lost a little bit. I think that pre-performance marketing, let's go back 25 years or so, when there was no performance marketing, what I don't remember. I wasn't old enough. I wasn't at that level back 25 or 30 years ago, but like clearly people measured brand impact, sales uplift, PR mentions. I think there probably is something modern here that we're missing because we're so wrapped around the performance marketing axle.
Yeah, I'll say, having worked in PR, the way that we used to have to tell people when you report to a client that you got them in, you know, the New York Post or Forbes or whatever it is, you would say, which receives 10 million unique monthly views. The number, it's misleading because 10 million people aren't going to see that particular article. But that was the only way that you could kind of tell them that, hey, this is a good public, like this is valuable and this is
Yeah.
earned media. They even had a thing, and I wish I remember who did this, but earlier publicists would say that earned media is worth 3 times more than an ad. So because it's earned, 3 different parties said that it was good. You as the person, your publicist, and then the media entity. So that's
Right.
weirdly how they calculated it. I hope I'm getting that right. But anyway, so then if you say, well, if I took out a full page ad in Vogue magazine, what would that cost? And times it by 3, and that is the value of this.
I think that's getting back to the roots of the problem, right? Because you can't connect an MQL or MQA or SQL to that, it's been devalued in the current culture. But I think we're swinging back to needing to measure this stuff. I think that's why podcasts, for example, have become very popular because, people get to know, like, and trust you because we're having a really good, hope it's a good conversation. And so that's, I think, why we're seeing the explosion of branded podcasts and independent media podcasts like Martech, who are trying to have these conversations, not as a direct sales vehicle, but as a way to, like, oh, there's a human, all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. There's a human here who really cares and is passionate about the thing that they made. And I want to hear them talk about that. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. We are almost there. This has been amazing. But here we're going to go to the last segment. So this is an experimental segment. I call it forcing yourself or force yourself. And the truth is, I'm just fascinated by people who manage to do hard things well. So I want to know, Molly, about a time when you had to force yourself to do something. Tell me about what it was. Tell me about what the process was that you went through. And then how did you overcome your internal and external objections to just push yourself and force yourself through?
Surprise, surprise, it had something to do with AI. I'm going to show you I'm a little amateur artist, and I made this collage of ChatGPT. And I don't know if you can see this, but it is a machine who is smoking a blunt made out of the New York Times. He's got glue and he's got scissors and he's just cutting everything up and putting it where it was.
Wow.
This was me being angry about AI in the beginning. As a traditional creative, I was saying this is some BS, like it's plagiarism, it's copyright laws and everything. And then when I started seeing people that I really respected saying it's not about that, you're thinking about it the wrong way. And seeing presentations that people did immediately using AI that were applied to brands, I went, okay, my goal that I put on my whiteboard, which is behind here, is make AI my biatch, because I came from like creatives that say, no, that's not what we do. I mean, these are the same kind of people that when Photoshop came out, they went, no, you got to get it right in the camera. You get it right in the camera, like that's cheating. Photoshop is cheating. Well, now all of us use Photoshop. And we've learned how to innovate on top of those things. So now I have become very AI dependent, where I think I use Fathom, for example, to record meetings. And then instead of poring over those notes for several hours, I'll run it through another platform and say, tell me anytime that a person mentioned this particular topic. And it helps me triangulate everything and think better. The other thing is, I learned with Fathom, it tells you when you're doing a monologue, it tells you when you've talked for 75% of the meeting. And so in some ways, I found that through this initiative, that AI is weirdly making me a better person, because I'm like, wait, no, stop. You need to ask questions. You're not doing that. Or I look back at transcripts and sometimes I might say, like, how could I have done this conversation better? How could I have been more empathetic about this problem? So weirdly, like, I keep my little guy on the wall and he looks angry and evil and stuff. But I don't think about AI as being that anymore. I weirdly have a relationship with my AIs and I love them. So I'm doing a different piece of art. It involves
Yeah.
robots and cats. Um,
Nice. Worth watching 10. That's an amazing reflection. Thank you for that. I mean, forcing yourself to sort of come to grips with, and I love the Photoshop analogy. I've been using some different analogies. I'll add that to the pile. My analogy was from the desktop publishing days, which is I grew up a designer and wanted to be a creative director. And I learned how to do paste up, like cutting out little things and making newspapers. That was my first design job, was doing post up ads for
yeah.
a small paper in Atlanta. And PageMaker blew that entire thing up. And there were a lot of people that, oh, it's not as good, or the resolution or whatever it might be. But it was that same thing with AI that you've gone through, which is wild. What a great reflection. Before we go, why don't you just tell where people can find you?
Oh, please find me on LinkedIn. I love meeting everybody. And also, if you want to look at our site, it's mosaicgroupmedia.com.
Awesome. Amazing. We talked about a lot today. We talked about social selling. We talked about brand measurement. We talked about forcing yourself to use AI. Any last words?
No, Mark, I mean, this is amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing what other guests you have on there because I know that there are other parts of the playbook that are broken and we need to fix them.
Amen. Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you.